Hey pottery students, this is Mrs. Krebs. I thought I'd make a short video for you just to talk about the salto recipe that I want you to use, okay, to kind of in place of clay. So if you looked at the recipe, you're going to want 2 cups of flour, okay, so it's okay if it's not exact. So I'm going to put those gently into a bowl, okay. You're going to need 1 cup of salt. Now I have kosher salt, which is a little bit heavier. I think regular salt would probably be better. It has a finer grain, but I like to cook with kosher salt. So we're just going to put that on top. What I'm going to ask you to do then, you can probably take a fork, okay, and just kind of stir it in a little bit so the salt isn't laying right on top of the flour. So hopefully when you're doing this in your kitchen or your mom's kitchen, that you have a piece of paper underneath just in case you don't want to get things too messy. Now in the recipe, it asked you to add 1 cup of water. I would do so very slowly and just a little bit at a time. I wouldn't, just kind of put it in there like a faucet. So get it in there, take your fork, kind of start mixing it up. Eventually you're going to get your hands in there and you're going to mix it with your hands. It's already starting to bind up a little bit, so I'm going to put some more in. Now, make sure you have all your supplies out. Okay, before you start doing this, I've got my parchment paper out. You could use aluminum foil, whatever it takes. I've got that ready on a baking sheet. I've got my rolling pin out in case you want to create a slab. Remember, these are all pottery words that we've talked about before. This is just going to be salt dough, so you're still going to be, working with it as if it was clay. It's just kind of a fun way to review for you. All right, starting to bind up. I think I'm going to have to start using my hands next. You could use a little bit more water if you have to. Okay, that's not a problem. So at this point, I need to get my hands in there. I need to kind of knead this together. You need to think about what other shapes you can use. Is there anything around the house that you could use for a stamp to add texture? Is there anything you could use around the house that would be, we could cut out with, whether it be a plastic cup. I looked around the house here and I found a couple things I'll show you. This is like sticky. All right, so it's starting to bind together. I'm just kind of getting it together and then, squeezing it in my hands. After we put this together, after you make your salt dough, you're going to need to let it rest for a little bit in the refrigerator or just in a plastic bag. So I've got a Ziploc bag here ready. Now it's really binding together nicely. So this should be done in a minute. I have a ceramic bowl out here which I could use. Just if I wanted, let's say if I wanted to take my dough and I wanted to create something with it, or I wanted to create a bowl from the dough, I could do that. There's still a little bit, tiny bits and pieces of flour at the bottom here. I'm trying to get it to go in. You could eat this, but I wouldn't recommend it. It'd probably be disgusting. Now, one thing I didn't mention, but you can probably see in the directions that I put for you in Sapphire, if you wanted this to be a different color, you can add food coloring to it. And the whole process, as it was starting to get together, what you could do, I'm going to make a little kind of a moat in this. See, as you start binding it together with your hands, okay, it doesn't really stick to your hands anymore. If you have a cut in your hand, it might be a little ouchy with the salt. So I'm going to get the last of that flour in there. I'm just going to kind of take this and squish it all together. Okay, picking up all those loose pieces. You want to keep your mess to a minimum. You don't want this all over the kitchen. But anyway, right now that dough is in a really good place. You could add color to it like we talked about before by adding some food coloring to it. Could you potentially break this apart and make one section of the dough one color, another section another color? Absolutely. Okay, that way it would, add a little bit more dimension to whatever you're going to make. So right now this is in good shape. This is in a good shape. Okay, I'm just kind of kneading it together. just like you're making bread. I want to make sure all those dry particles are mixed in so we don't have any issues. Okay, so I've got my 2 sections of dough, okay, salt dough, and I have a Ziploc baggie. What I'm going to do, just put them in here to rest. You want it to kind of rest maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Okay, make sure you try to get all that air out if you can. It's not going to hurt it if there's a little bit in there. Okay, just let it rest for a little bit. Clean up your hands, clean up the kitchen, and then I'll do another video on what I want you to do with the salt dough. Okay, these are all things. We're going to talk about some techniques that you use in the art class and pottery class. You're going to apply those techniques to your salt dough. Okay, all right, look for me in video number 2.